It's always a pleasure, and I hope that you enjoy yourself in China, and let us know what's going on over there.
Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely get into that. Everybody hit the like button as you come on because that helps boost the stream in YouTube's algorithm. So, okay, Professor Marty, let's get started. A lot has been happening. So, over the last 24 hours, we had Iran clarify through concerted action in the Strait of Hormuz, turning back ships, stating very publicly, directly to the United States that its naval blockade that has continued is a violation of the ceasefire, and therefore the Strait of Hormuz is not just being the control that Iran had over the Strait of Hormuz was not really questioned or challenged in this time, but Iran essentially said, we are not going to open it up more for additional oil tankers. We are going to keep strict control over it and turn back every single ship that we believe it is deemed hostile and or an important element to gaining leverage over the United States. Now, uh, Trump has answered back saying that if Iran doesn't stop this and if Iran doesn't come to the table, he is going to begin once again threatening airstrikes on Iran's infrastructure, its oil infrastructure, all of its power plants. It's that he's going to wipe them all away. We're here again. It seems like at square one. So Iran has answered the U.S. naval blockade with a pretty hard hit because there was a lot of hopes that the Strait of Hormuz was going to be reopened now that there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. That's not happening. The exact opposite is happening, and the Trump administration, Donald Trump himself, seems to be in a panic, going back to the old threats of wiping out this infrastructure, which led to the major increase in energy prices in the first place. So, Professor Marandi, where are we right now? Your reaction to the developments, especially over the last 24, 36 hours, which have been, I think, a shock to the Trump administration and the U.S. Power elites at large.
Well, we have to sort of go back a bit just to remind everyone what happened and what is happening. There was a genocide going on in Gaza, and Iran supports the Palestinian people. It is the only country that supports the Palestinian people, and I mean as a state, as a government. Otherwise, the entire world now supports the Palestinian people. Everyone has woken up to the truth. In the West, included in India, uh, there too, the mood is shifting away from this genocidal and illegitimate regime. So the United States wants to, and wanted and wants to help the excuse me, the Israeli regime take the region, control the region. We saw that from the U.S. ambassador's interview with Tucker Carlson when he said if Israel takes the entire region, then that's fine with the United States. So we're facing an expansionist regime that's genocidal, that's ethno supremacist, that it considers itself to be a master race, a chosen people, and everyone else to be subhuman. And the United States and the West and the Europeans, they fully support this. The Australians, the New Zealand, and so on. So we fast forward, and we have a 12-day war where the United States under Trump and the Israeli regime conspire and they carry out an aggression against Iran, a war of aggression. The West, the collective West supports it. The German chancellor says the Israeli regime does our dirty work for us. They condemn Iran, the Europeans. For the Israelis and Americans launched the war, and they condemn Iran for the war. So, but Iran does not strike back at these Arab dictatorships, except for once at Qatar, because the Americans, Qatar was symbolic of CENTCOM. It is where CENTCOM is. And so after the Americans bombed Iran, Iran bombed the American base in Qatar. But these Arab dictatorships, they've been complicit in conspiring against Iran for decades. I mean, in 1980, when the West pushed Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, gave him chemical weapons, these family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf funded Saddam Hussein. And ironically, when the Americans wanted to invade Iraq, they all helped the Americans invade Iraq, and they hosted U.S. forces. Whereas the Iranians, who hated Saddam Hussein, they were opposed to the invasion and they condemned it, and so did Hezbollah. Then these regimes, after the Arab Spring, they worked with the CIA to overthrow the only governments that were opposed to the West: Libya and Syria. Right, like, so the Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf, they didn't, there was no Arab Spring there. They spent money to destroy Syria and Libya, two countries that were highly critical of the Western Empire. And of course, Al Qaeda was used in both, first in Libya and then in Syria. The same Al Qaeda that a decade earlier we were told carried out 9/11. So the 12-day war was supposed to finish in 1 or 2 days, and Iran was supposed to collapse. Didn't happen. Iran won the war, and we fast forward to this war. Again, like the 12-day war, Iran is negotiating with the United States. The United States is conspiring to attack Iran. Same model, all over and over again. To finish in a couple of days, they begin by slaughtering 168 little girls, Americans, and a couple of dozen teachers and school staff in Minab, and carry out atrocities across the country for 40 days with their Zionist allies. So again, they started the war. Iran did not start the war. They escalated. They started escalating and targeting critical infrastructure. They began with bombing hospitals and schools, but then they started bombing.
Unfortunately, Professor Marandi, we're having some lag
gas
issues. Can you hear me? Okay.
Installation. And then Iran escalated. So every step of the way, they escalated. And every step of the way, these Arab family dictatorships were with America.
Professor Marandi, can you hear me okay?
Because their territory was used. Without them, this war could not happen. Without them, right now, the United States can't attack Iran again.
Professor Marandi, can you hear me okay?
They can't wage war against
there's a lot of
Iran. Without Saudi
Professor Marandi, can you hear me okay? I'm hearing. I think Professor Marandi, we're having some. I think we're having some audio issues. It's slowed down quite a bit. I think it's yeah, it might be on your end. I don't know if you're able to. You might want to come in and come back out. That could be something you do, and then we can restart. But I can. And I can wait here if you want to reload, and I'll be right back. And I can keep talking. But yeah, you've completely frozen. Can you? Okay. So Professor Marandi, yeah, if you can, just reload, and yes, and I'll bring you back in. So yeah, we are dealing with some connection issues, everybody. Please hit that like button. Professor Marandi will be back. Yeah, so what Professor Marandi is saying is that there's a huge context to what is going on now. What is going on is absolutely, it just feels like full circle again. We are back where we were not too long ago when Trump and the United States were threatening to destroy all of Iran's power plants and their bridges, Iran's bridges, which let's be honest, is probably not even possible in the short term sense, meaning that this would have to be a major, long war. And we know what happened last time the Trump administration threatened this, and it was a massive spike in the oil prices and a massive problem for the global economy as a whole. And I know Person Marandi and I have been talking about what the global ramifications of this are, which is the potential for a worldwide global economic recession, which would only make it even harder for the United States to supposedly accomplish whatever objectives it sees in its head as worthwhile pursuing in this war, mainly the destruction of the Iranian government and the Iranian state. That's kind of where we are now. And, First Marty has not come back just yet. So I'm just going to check something real quick. Here we go. He is coming back now. And hopefully we can just get started again. So thanks so much for your patience. Yeah, but in any event, this is all being spurred by the fact. Oh, here we go. I see Professor Marty in the backstage. Let's bring him back in. Professor, welcome back.
Sorry, Danny. Well, thank you.
No, it's
I
okay.
think the closer we get to war, the worse the internet connection becomes.
Right.
Yeah, so I was
Continue.
saying that throughout, so okay, yeah, so these Arab I don't know where I got cut off, but in the 1980s, these Arab family dictatorships, they supported Saddam Hussein against Iran alongside the West. And then they helped the West overthrow Libya and Syria during the so-called Arab Spring, and all these dictatorships that were pro-West remained in place, using Al-Qaeda literally a decade after 9/11. Then, of course, but when the Americans struck Iran, with the Israelis and the Americans, Iran only struck Qatar and only the American base during the 12-day war. But in this war, the Americans have been using their territory, their airspace, their bases, not just American bases, but their bases, their civilian infrastructure, their ports against Iran. So they're waging war against Iran. So Iran was striking the Israeli regime 24 hours a day and night, for 40 days, the American assets. And then gradually, when they started striking Iranian civilian infrastructure repeatedly, like critical infrastructure, Iran began to retaliate against critical infrastructure where the Americans and the Europeans had shares in these countries. So now, without these family dictatorships, this war is not possible. It's just not doable. They need their airspace, they need their air bases, they need their land to wage war. So what is going to happen? As soon as the Americans strike, Iran is going to strike back. They will strike back and strike back hard. And from where I'm viewing things, I think that we are finally going to reach the point where the world moves towards a global depression, because I do not see at all. I don't see it the slightest the slightest chance that Iran will to accept U.S. demands, and I have no doubt that the United States will not be able to defeat Iran. But what the United States will probably do is that it will try to devastate the country, and which just shows how genocidal the United States is. It just shows how genocidal the collective West is, because Trump has been making genocidal statements about Iran for many days now, for weeks. It wasn't just about wiping out the civilization of the Iranian people. He spoke about obliterating Iran. He spoke about taking Iran back to the Stone Age. We never saw any outrage in the Western media. We didn't see any of these mainstream Western journalists outraged by these these calls or these threats to wipe out the country. We never saw anything. Not from the Guardian, not from the Times, not from the New York Times, not from the Breitbart. from none of them. What we did see, Danny, and I don't know if you saw this, was that when the Iranian delegation was going to Pakistan, the Washington Post put up an editorial saying that that the negotiators should be murdered. They put up an opinion piece, the Washington Post. So the media, the journalists in the West, are competing with the state to to promote crimes against humanity, war crimes. Just like in Lebanon, you see Western journalists in Beirut who are a bunch of criminals. They talk about Hezbollah strongholds and Hezbollah bases where everyone knows that they're bombing towns. Right now, as we speak, they're blowing up villages in the south and the areas that they've occupied, the Israeli regime. So just homes, people's homes. They're flattening it to make it look like Gaza. This is how monstrous they are, and this is how monstrous Western journalists in Beirut are. I spoke to two of them. They contacted me to get, I don't know, an opinion of like a sentence or two, not a soundbite, but I think for like written. It may have been a soundbite, I don't know. But in any case, and I told both of them, why do you write strongholds? Why do you write um, Hezbollah targets? And both of them separately said more or less the same thing, that it wasn't us, it was our editor. And I told them both, you're complicit. I told both of them that you're complicit. It's in your name, so you're a war criminal, just like your editors, just like the owners of your media outlets, and just like Netanyahu. There's no real difference between any of you because you're part of the apparatus that helps enable these crimes. So the Wall Street Journal, I mean, sorry, the Washington Post was calling for the assassination of the negotiators while they were in Pakistan. And on the flight back to Iran, we all felt that there was a very good chance that our plane would be shot down. So we are now where we are. And it's unclear what will happen. I don't know what the Iranian decision will be about sending a negotiating team. But I think that the chances for a major war are close. And I think that if that happens, then the infrastructure of the Persian Gulf will be destroyed. And we're heading towards the hot season. In other words, people will have to evacuate all these countries, the Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and many parts of Saudi Arabia, because they will no longer have, if they don't have, if they start targeting our critical infrastructure like power plants, Iran will have uh, uh, no choice but to retaliate, because these countries are part of the war. And the United States uses these countries. So Iran will destroy their electrical power plants, which are much easier to do for the Iranians, because Iran's power plants are spread out all over the country. Theirs are uh, they're few and large, and when they're destroyed, the Persian Gulf region becomes very hot and very humid. It starts getting very hot and very humid from about a month from now. So it's not going to be a place where people can live. The countries will collapse. I think that oil and gas and petrochemicals and helium and all that we should just forget that they exist in this part of the world for the next few years, and the world economy will crash.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a very dark picture you paint, but one that now, Professor Marandi, we have. At one point, we could say, well, this is quote unquote hypothetical, but we've already been at war. I mean, the United States and Iran have already been at war, and we saw Iran's response. It was very measured, but it was severe, and it had an escalation ladder to it. So it's what you're saying should be. I mean, people shouldn't doubt your predictions anymore, given everything that has happened, and and so, Professor Marandi, all of this has come, or at least the latest round of, I think, a break from this movement toward so-called negotiations. It's all come from the United States. The United States still, right as Iran did a goodwill gesture around the Lebanon ceasefire, saying it would begin the process of giving permission to more tankers to come through the Strait of Hormuz, easing some of the
Let me
pressure.
explain that. Let me
Yeah, yeah,
explain
yeah.
that from
Please.
you. What happened was Iran and the United States ultimately, through messages and then indirect talks, they negotiated a ceasefire. Through they didn't negotiate. The only time that Iran and the United States negotiated was during the day that Dr. Ghalibaf, the head of parliament, met Vance. Before and after that, there have been no negotiations. No one should be mistaken. All of this has been done through messages. Now, what happened was that there was a ceasefire. Why was there a ceasefire? Initially, the Americans, Trump was saying unconditional surrender. Then that didn't work out. Then they said Iranian missiles and drones are running out. That didn't happen. Iranian firepower increased. Ultimately, the United States put forward, I think on day 34, maybe, or 36, I don't remember, put out that 15-point plan. Iran rejected it. Then Iran put out its own 10-point plan, and Trump accepted it. He accepted to negotiate, had to have the negotiations, so it to be the focus of the negotiations. And of course, Trump didn't do that because he's dishonest, and that's something that the Iranians expected. But in any case, that's what led to the ceasefire, that the Americans had to evolve their position to accept the Iranian 10-point plan, which is a very reasonable plan, for the basis of negotiations. Then the ceasefire, in the ceasefire, there was supposed to be an end to the fighting, especially in Lebanon, because the fighting was very heavy there. The Prime Minister of Pakistan said Lebanon is a part of the ceasefire, and then Netanyahu went and carpet bombed Lebanon. He carpet bombed it, slaughtering people, hundreds of people in 10 minutes. Just women and children and ordinary people in all neighborhoods, not even sympathetic to resistance in some pro-Zionist neighborhoods where you have the Lebanese forces and other sinister groups funded by the West. Why? Because Netanyahu did not want the ceasefire. So Iran was supposed to open up the Strait of Hormuz to unfriendly ships. Because why unfriendly ships? Because these 5 regimes, they are part of the war. So Iran allowed
Um, Professor Marandi, unfortunately, the audio again is cutting out. If you can hear me,
I can hear you.
okay, okay, good. I just wanted to see if I
Okay,
could,
so
if I interrupted a bit, it's restabilized. So yes, I think it has.
okay, so Iran said that it will allow more ships to exit the Strait of Hormuz, including ships from unfriendly countries. Who are the unfriendly countries? The countries that hosted U.S. bases: Qatar, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain. So these extra ships were about to go, and then the Israelis basically tore up the ceasefire by slaughtering the Lebanese. And so Iran stopped. And for 10 days, Iran said, we're not allowing these ships to go until there's a ceasefire, because that's part of the deal. So the Strait of Hormuz was never closed. It was only ships that were hostile to Iran that couldn't go. So Chinese ships, Iranian ships, Iraqi ships, Russian ships, they can go back and forth. But these 5 countries that were complicit and are complicit in aggression, they couldn't. But here they agreed to let some of them go. But Netanyahu wrecked the ceasefire. So for 10 days, Iran kept the Strait of Hormuz, restricted, until finally the Israeli regime was forced to accept the ceasefire. 10 days of keeping the Strait of Hormuz like it was put a lot of pressure on the United States. Then then Netanyahu almost was being forced to accept. He refused to do so. Iran made a further threat that it would strike Israel. The next day, Netanyahu accepted. As soon as Netanyahu accepted the ceasefire, even though he's destroying buildings across southern Lebanon right now in a violation of the ceasefire, and he killed someone soon after the ceasefire with a drone, Iran allowed the Strait of Hormuz to open. But 3 or 4 days earlier, during that 10-day period, when Netanyahu was violating the ceasefire, the Americans imposed a siege on Iranian ports. So the Iranians opened up the port, but Trump said, I'm preserving the siege, right? So Iran said, well, if you're going to keep the siege in place, that's a violation of the agreement. That's a violation of the ceasefire. So we are going to, again, go back to restricting ships from leaving the Strait of Hormuz. So the ceasefire was first violated by the Israeli regime, and then it was violated by the Trump regime. And that's why the global energy crisis is growing worse and worse by the minute because of their actions. Trump could have yesterday, when Iran, after Netanyahu accepted the ceasefire, the day before yesterday, when Iran said, okay, now these ships can go through the Strait of Hormuz, he could have lifted the siege on the ports, and that would have been a good off-ramp. But he chose to do the opposite. He chose to escalate. And that means that we are heading towards war. And of course, today he's been making genocidal threats again. And so we are where we are.
Yeah. Well, according to Tasnim, Iranian media, Professor Marandi, there are reports that Iran is indeed refusing or rejecting talks while the U.S. naval blockade continues, and until it is lifted, at least these are the initial reports, it's not going to happen. Of course, things are subject to change in the coming hours and days, but the ceasefire, so-called ceasefire deadline, Professor Marandi, is soon on the way too. So that's another element to this, is the U.S. has only escalated during this time, and has treated talks similarly to how it's treated talks with Iran for quite a long time now, which is to use them as another tool to build up and eventually engage in war. But the Iranian, the Iranian military and the IRGC, they're saying that, and we talked about this before he came on, that they are producing and building and developing missiles and drones at a faster rate than they were before February 28th, before the war started. So talk about what kind of preparations then are being made, and how is it that Donald Trump, in his Truth Social post, he's reacting to a development, this allegation that Iran fired on an Indian tanker, as the basis for increasing the level of threats, despite all of the consequences that are going to come should strikes occur, should the U.S. make good on its threats. Why do this? I mean, why do this now? What's your thoughts on all of this?
Well, the plan was escalation. After all, we wouldn't be here. First of all, if Netanyahu had if he had accepted the ceasefire instead of slaughtering Lebanese citizens, and when he was finally forced to stop, if Trump had lifted the siege after Iran had opened up the Strait of Hormuz to hostile shipping, then we wouldn't be here at all. There would be no reason to force ships to go back. But when Iran saw that he was imposing an embargo, a siege, he was preserving it, then Iran told ships to stay in the Strait of Hormuz. A couple of ships tried to ignore Iranian demands, and they were met with force. Iran fired at them, but they weren't really seriously damaged. They didn't fire missiles or anything at them. And they quickly went back into the Persian Gulf. But you're right. The Iranians have been preparing for war since the ceasefire. I posted footage of the commander of Iran's missile force. He was visiting a factory. And I said this before, and we've been saying it for years. And the analysts in the West like to ignore what we say, and therefore they always miscalculate. But we've been saying that Iran's underground missile bases are untouchable. They can't be touched by the Americans or the Israeli regime. and its drone bases, the same is true for them. And Iran's factories that produce key weapons are all underground too. So the footage that I posted is of an underground base, but also it shows a place where they're assembling missiles. Iran has no shortage of missiles and drones. And if the US, and the reason is, as we discussed multiple times, the reason is because Iran has been preparing for a war against it by the Americans ever since 9/11, ever since the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember what Wesley Clark said,
Sure.
that the general told him they want to invade 7 countries. How America, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're
Okay.
getting cut off, and it's such a convenient time as you're about to explain 7 countries in five
What was I
years.
saying?
That what
Yes.
you were talking
So
about how
Wesley
the
Clark,
name. Yeah, continue. Yes.
yeah. So Wesley Clark said that a general told him that they were going to take 7 countries in 5 years, and a lot of people assisted the Americans and the Israelis, the Americans in doing that. They helped undermine Libya, they undermined Syria, and they all were playing useful idiots for the empire. I mean, if we look at them as not being assets, then they were useful idiots. So all these 6 countries are gone, but not in 5 years, but in 25 years. Now the last country remains, and that's Iran, the crown jewel. But Iran has been preparing itself since then, and even before, but since then especially, because the threats became more direct. The United States surrounded Iran. They took Iraq, Afghanistan. They had bases across the Persian Gulf. Turkey is a part of NATO. So the Republic of Azerbaijan, a client regime. So the Iranians, they developed these missile capabilities, but they've also prepared themselves for a land war. And just as the Americans are miscalculated about Iran's missile and drone capabilities, they are going to miscalculate when they carry out the land offensive. The Iranians will let them probably take some land, some islands, and then they will start hitting them. And they will go on and continue to strike and strike and strike for days and weeks and months. And then Hegseth will go on TV and say they're running out of missiles, they're running out of drones, and it's about to finish, and it's all over. And CNN, even the opposing media, as in the 40-day war and in the 12-day war, they say, yes, we're winning. They'll show footage of all the destruction. They'll probably be like during the 48-day war, mostly decoys, because Iran deployed at least tens of thousands of decoys during the months before this war. And the Americans and the Israelis have destroyed many thousands of decoys, airplanes, helicopters, launchers, air defenses, all fake. And they're really good. They even give off heat. Most of them I think are Chinese, but there are some Iranian. I don't know how much of it's Iranian, how much of it's Chinese, but they're quite good. But in any case, just as Iran has prepared itself with missiles and drones, it has prepared itself for the land war. The geography of Iran is not, it's mountainous, the terrain is rugged. Iran has underground bases across the south of the country. Its navy is largely untouched. Those enough number of naval ships that were in port that were damaged, they'll be repaired, but they're for like patrolling the seas. They're not for war. They destroyed one ship that was unarmed. It was in a international maneuver, which was a crime what they did. But the real naval assets that will be used for war, they're underground tunnels. Iran's air force is in underground tunnels. Iran's air defenses are in underground tunnels. I've posted images of all of these before, footage, so that people would know. But again, They ignored it in the West. So when this ground attack begins, Iran will be ready, and we'll hear propaganda about how fantastic the U.S. is doing. But after a week or two, it'll become clear that it's not going to go well. And then there's the issue of striking Iranian infrastructure. If they strike Iranian infrastructure, Iran has no choice but to strike back. Iran will strike back the Israeli regime and American assets. But those regimes that are complicit, they cannot escape retaliation. They cannot pretend to be neutral when they're killing Iranians. They're full partners in this. They are full partners. And in a month from now, as I said, it's going to begin to get very hot in the Arabian Peninsula. So people are going to have to leave. They're going to have to drive to Iraq or to Jordan. These countries, especially the tiny ones, they won't last. So what Trump is doing is he's pushing an economic crisis fast forward. He's making this economic crisis worse by the hour, and I think in the coming days we're going to see a catastrophe unfold unless Trump backs down. But he's not the sort of person who so far has shown himself as being capable of taking an off ramp. He could have done that when the Iranians, as we discussed earlier, eased the passage, allowed more ships to go through the passageway of the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
He could have done that then.
Yeah, yeah, and this blockade, which as many on this show have noted, has a huge farcical nature to it, given the range of the area of operation that the U.S. Navy is conducting it in. All of that is to say is that there's a lot of room to just stop this, to go back to what already was a pretty disastrous status quo, which is having already fought, several over a month of war and come out of it only with a global economy in tatters, a military a military apparatus that's overspent, and an Iranian government and Iranian society that is much more united than before. And an element to this, Professor Marandi, the two things are kind of happening at the same time. I feel like you have this high morale in Iran right now, both with the people and, of course, I'm hearing, you can confirm this for me, I'm hearing that there are millions of people signing up to volunteer should there be any kind of ground operation, should there be any need for forces, in addition to those who are, operating the air defenses and operating the missile systems, etc. And then there's the other side of this, which is the Trump administration also is saying that in the coming days, as they're talking about negotiations in Pakistan, the coming days, the United States Navy is going to start boarding Iranian vessels that are sailing through not only the Strait of Hormuz but out of it and back into it are going to be boarded, which is a major escalation, especially with a country that you're already at war with or already had been in active war with before the ceasefire. And you have this element, if you could comment on it, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which Yemen for a few days now has said they're waiting for the right time and they are ready whenever that right time comes to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which would be a major blow to the already burnt and overheated global economy from this war. So, your reactions to these things, because these are additional, I feel like, elements to what already is, I think, a catastrophic situation that is confronting, especially the U.S. Side of things, U.S. empire side of things. It's very, I guess, it's very damning, to say the least. Your thoughts?
Well, if the United States starts boarding ships, Iran has all sorts of ships in the Persian Gulf that it can board too. And remember, these ships hold material or energy or assets that largely belong to these 5 countries that are complicit in the war, and which without these countries would not have been able to happen. So Iran will retaliate. This is not going to end well for anyone, and it's definitely not going to end well for the empire. So they can board a few ships here and there and steal Iranian grain or steal assets of the Iranian people. but the Iranians will be forced to retaliate. And the Persian Gulf is stacked with ships right now, full. I mean, if you look at the images, they're just right behind, one after another. And of course, if there's a restart of the war, and then attacks are launched on infrastructure, those ships will all be destroyed too, just like the other infrastructure. I mean, just like the oil and gas and other infrastructure. It's just madness. It's like the United States is run by madmen who are either utterly compromised, or it's just the Zionist first people who are in full control and they don't care about the United States or the global economy or the Indian economy or the German economy or the Argentinian economy or anything like that. They just care about the Zionist regime and its expansionist policies and its genocidal policies, and so it's willing to sacrifice everyone. There's just no good scenario here. The only thing that we see, if we look ahead at the way things are going now, is utter destruction. And this is all just to help the Israeli regime. It's all about the Israeli regime. It's all about Zionism. The collapse of the global economy seems to be coming about. Why? Because of Israel.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that appears to be the case. And Professor Marandi, there is a deep, I think, uh, contradiction occurring. Recent polls are showing that not some on 20% of Americans support how Donald Trump has handled the Iran situation, and yet you have the Trump administration continuing onward with this. You have, of course, Israel. Israel, interestingly enough, because of the cessation of the both sides of direct strikes on Iran, because that has stopped, Israel has tried to fade into the background, and of course, focus a lot of its attention on Lebanon and Hezbollah. But nonetheless, it does appear that Israel, despite not having the ability to fight any of this on its own, is placing a lot of pressure on the United States to continue this. Um, so yeah,
By the way,
your thoughts?
they're killing people in Gaza every day. They're
Yeah,
sniping
yeah.
kids. Just a couple of days ago, a girl in class, I think they just sniped her as she was sitting among her classmates. This is the Israeli regime, and in the West Bank, they continue to batter and beat and kill these colonizers. Continue to batter, beat, and kill Palestinians. I mean, it's not just Lebanon. Lebanon, right now, they're blowing up village after village, and of course, we had the slaughter that Iran forced them to stop. But it's what they're doing in Lebanon is ongoing. What they're doing in Gaza is ongoing, and what they're doing in the West Bank is ongoing.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and the uh, all of that is ongoing, and uh, uh, we are now on the precipice of another round of it's just so blatantly obvious that we're kind of coming back full circle to where we were just February 28th after the initial strikes. We're coming back to threats, which then led to strikes, which then led to Iran's response, its self-defense, which caused a huge amount of damage to the region, to the regional actors involved in all of this, and the United States itself. So uh, a repeat of this, though, I imagine, would have a cumulative effect. Um, you said that you believe that a Great Depression is coming. How does that square with a kinetic war, though? In the past, there was only one time, I believe, where there was a real depression occurring at the same time as a major a confrontation between nations, and that was World War II. There was a depression happening, and the depression was not over when World War II started, and it had a major impact on the outcome of that war. So, your thoughts on how uh, you know, the infusion of an economic disaster that is still building and still there, and will be pushed to the edge if the U.S. starts again. How that will affect the outcome, because that economic depressions affect everybody, but Iran has been in the position of being mainly iced out of the and kept out of a large part of this global economy, and has had to, even mainstream media, think tanks, all of them have had to acknowledge, has essentially developed a pretty self-sufficient economy, potentially prepared to also take blows that the global economy hits. Likely, the U.S. is not in that position. So your thoughts on this?
Well, there's no doubt that the war has caused significant damage to Iran. But Iran is a huge country also. Um, and a future war will create more damage. But what the damage that's being done to the global economy is not something that happens within seconds, like when a missile strikes a building and the building comes down. When the right now we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is the rising energy costs and the rising food costs that we're seeing here and there. Some places it's worse, some places it's not as bad for a host of reasons, because of the supply chains, because of the fact that some countries don't have reserves, some countries have different needs than other countries. But in any case, uh, it is getting worse. But we are going to reach a point where within some say, and I don't have, I'm not I can't be certain of this, but it is said that within the next 2 weeks we're going to have a new the crisis is going to reach a new level, and then within 4 weeks it's going to become a full blown crisis. And so we're just, as I said, we're right now we're witnessing the tip of the iceberg, but when it hits, it's like an atomic bomb. It's like multiple atomic bombs, because factories will shut down. A missile is not going to hit the factories, but those factories will no longer be functioning. Economies will be shutting down, and again, this and agriculture will be badly affected. We'll probably have global hunger. We'll probably have tens of millions of people, if not more, on the move. I mean, imagine if countries begin to face food crisis, people will move and they'll go to the traditional places that they used to go to, and even though those places will be on the verge of collapse too. I mean, the way in which the world is going to be impacted by what the Israeli regime and Trump are doing is
Person Marandi, I'm just gonna interrupt just because. Oh yeah, okay. I think you're back. I think when I interrupt, you actually come back.
okay.
So that's a good thing. That's a good
Okay.
thing. Yeah, you were saying that the impact
So
of this, and then you kept going.
yeah, so the impact of this is going to be beyond anyone's imagination. Hunger, factories shut down, businesses shut down, unemployment across the world, in the West and the global majority. People will be on the move in probably the tens of millions. It's just mind boggling. And all of this is being carried out because a genocidal regime is forcing the United States to launch war. This genocidal regime with US support launched the war against Iran and lost in 12 days,
Mm,
even though it
right.
carried out a blitzkrieg attack. It had full US support. It lost that war in 12 days. It's just not capable of fighting a war against Iran. So now the United States has to come in. They fought for 40 days. They failed. And now
Mm,
they're saying, no, we have to go and wipe out the civilization, obliterate the country, send them back to the Stone Age. And again, instead of being outraged, outlets like the the Washington Post say assassinate the negotiators. This is what we're today dealing with in the West.
yeah. Yeah, and Person Marandi, I'm in China, and I talked to. I know he's. I think a mutual contact of yours too, John Weiwei, and he he was very clear. And usually what John Wei says is a very informed a type of clarity, and he was very clear that you know a lot has been made of China and Iran, and recently there's been rumors that China was a major player in pushing Iran to the ceasefire table and to agree to the ceasefire. And he said no, he does not believe that that happened at all, and that actually um, China's position is that of course it doesn't want to see instability, it doesn't want, but at the same time it is not afraid of the consequences of what is going on here and won't interfere with that, which is a general principle of China, for every kind of conflict and every war that occurs in the world. But um, with that, it seems like that's also angered the United States, because what has Trump always done during his tenure this time around? He's looked at both China and Russia and said, "You need to help me solve things. Russia, you need to help me solve the Ukraine conflict, which I am the the major party to. The U.S. is the major party to the reason why it's even happening." And then, of course, he always looks to China. China, you need to help solve Ukraine. You need to help solve this and that problem for us, or we're going to tariff you, or this kind of thing. And now it seems like the target is okay. We need to hit Iran. We need to wage war on Iran. And oh yeah, we'll reveal what the real motive here is too, which is to try to cut off the entirety of the multipolar world, with, of course, China being one of the, if not the most important economic pillar of this. So, your thoughts on the global ramifications of where we are now, how, especially outside of the region, how this is set to impact the multipolar world, Iran with its biggest friends, China and Russia, and where all of this stands to fall on the multipolar world. And some say it benefits, some say it hurts, but I think the picture is pretty nuanced and complex. So your thoughts on this? Oh, you were muted. Hold on one second, Professor Marandi. Start
No, that was
again.
sorry. That was me. That was
Okay.
me. I
Okay.
did it on purpose to.
Mhm.
So um, I thought it would help the connection. So I think it's going to be devastating for the global economy, for the majority and the West. No one is going to be spared from this catastrophe. But I do think it's going to bring an end to the empire. Already, I think this is a turning point, and the United States has succeeded in destroying its image over the past 2.5 years, its credibility. It's shown itself to be military incapable, and people are shocked across the world uh, that Iran was able to stand up to the United States in this way, including in China. Many
Mhm.
of my Chinese friends and colleagues and people who are experts in the field in China during the past uh, few weeks have been telling me that in China that their views of Tehran have evolved completely because people across the world were influenced by Western narratives on Iran. They believe the nonsense that the so-called regime, as they love to say in the West, is unpopular, that it's imploding, that it's corrupt, that its leaders were hated, and so on. All the narratives that we've been hearing for that it's anti-woman, it beats kids. I don't know. Cuts. What was it that Trump said? He cuts kids in half, or exactly the thing that the Israelis do. He was saying that they cut kids in half, or something like that. I know this psychopath.
Something barbaric. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so a lot of people influenced by Western think tanks and Western media and Western officials thought that Iran would fall. And
Mhm.
when it didn't, everyone was shocked and surprised. And people across the world have been contacting me. I've been overwhelmed with speaking with people across the world, with media. I'm running on empty right now. And but the point is that people are fascinated about Iran. They want to know more about Iran. That's why on all these shows I've been there's not much material out there for people to read. And I said on your show and on other shows to read Going to Tehran, the book by the Leverets. And people are interested in about Imam Hussein, about Ayatollah Khamenei, about Ashura, about Iran's history, about Iranian civilization. Interest towards Iran, Hezbollah, the axis of resistance has grown, and contempt for Zionism and for Israel and for Trump. And sadly, the United States, even though most Americans are opposed to this madness, but contempt for the United States is growing. That is not good news. None of that is good news for an empire. And ultimately, when the global economy collapses, people are going to remember who brought it about. It is the Israeli regime in the United States, just like they were the ones, along with the West, that brought about the genocide in Gaza, that enabled the genocidal acts in Lebanon, brought about the destruction of Syria and the rise of Al Qaeda and all that. They will remember that their own lifestyles were infinitely impacted or heavily impacted by a Zionist regime that was willing to destroy the global economy so that it could just carry out, so that it could just wipe out people and take their land.
Mm. Yeah, in our last couple of minutes here, Professor Marandi, it is very clear in this very large country that I'm in, really the largest country in the world, especially economically, that nobody thinks that the U.S. is winning. Nobody, and everyone, everyone that I've spoken to is very much, there's no antipathy toward Iran, and there's a lot of there's surprise, but I think, there's a lot of like awe over how Iran has done this. And I think Iran did something that's very difficult to do in this day and age, which is to in China, Deng Xiaoping said, hide your strength and bide your time. And Iran had done that to a shocking level, like a shocking in a time period where it's very hard, especially when you have entire entities, colonial entities like Israel and the United States as a imperial albatross, invest so much money in intelligence, so much money on spying, so much money in infiltration, so much money and time on all of that, and still Iran, they admit it. They were surprised. They didn't know this was going to happen. Hell, even Hezbollah, which is right next door to Israel, what did Israel say when Hezbollah entered the war? Oops, we were so surprised that they could hit so hard. We had no idea that they had this kind of artillery, that they had this kind of missile systems. No idea. And now they do. But
And the
I think this
resilience,
is,
the
yeah,
resilience
exactly.
behind that, which is the real thing, the
Right.
resistance, the resilience of the axis of
Right.
resistance, I think is the most extraordinary thing. If you have, I mean, the weapons still don't compare to what the empire has. But if
No.
but you can have even better weapons, but still, if you don't have the resilience, the resistance, the motivation, the faith, then
Mhm.
they will all fail you.
Yep. Yeah, and and that's seemingly where we are now. And your final thoughts, because yeah, this is a real inflection moment. We'll probably talk again soon, depending on what happens in the coming days. It seems like the United States is in it's a really bad strait. This is probably in terms of a direct war where the U.S. cannot help but be very directly involved and climb an escalation ladder like this because Iran has been able to defend itself and stand up to each and every single blow that it's tried to land. Um, it seems like an unprecedented moment, and as you said before the show, the world will change. Any thoughts? Or the world will change incredibly. So, your final thoughts as we close out here.
Well, I don't know what will happen in the days ahead. The United States may strike tonight. That's just how they do things, like the Israelis. But and we may not have electricity, or I may have problems with the internet or other problems. So my what I basically would like people to remember is that we're all responsible, and we all have to be active, and we all have to stand up against this evil empire and Zionism. And I think that while it looks very bad right now for the world, but we all have to keep pushing. And it's not just the axis of resistance that has to resist, it is the broader resistance that exists across the globe. Whether it's boycotts of goods, or whether it's protests, or whether it's putting pressure on local governments to halt cooperation, or to halt purchasing goods, or to distance themselves from the empire. We're all responsible to do whatever it is that we can do, but we have to remain optimistic, and no one should feel guilty for what their government does as long as they are doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. Indeed, you know, we are in a moment where I think the mask is off. The United States as the empire with who controls it, the Epstein class, the oligarchs, the elites, this kind of I guess you call it transnational Zionist, uh, imperial, warmongers. They are in desperate straits, and yeah, we truly do not have control over, especially those of us in the West, over what they do. What we have control over is how we try to change that fact, and that is, I think, going to be a huge point of contention and something we will have to reckon with in the days and weeks to come. So everybody, Professor Marandi joined. We did really good here, despite me having no VPN right now because the VPN companies are absolutely in complete crisis. I have a suspicion, Professor Marandi, it's the war, that it's the consequence, the economic consequences of this war that actually have these companies. The dates are very suspicious. April 8th was when it seems like a lot of these companies have made major cutbacks and say they have outage issues everywhere. And that's my hunch. But nevertheless, I think we're going to see major impact on all industries everywhere should this continue. So, President Marandi, thanks so much for joining. We're going to head out together. I want to thank everyone who gave a super chat. They were very generous, especially thanking Professor Marandi, who we want to see him at home. So do your part, everybody. Look, he's at home right now. He doesn't have to be in hiding because the U.S. is bombing his country. So be sure to not only hit the like button, support this show, in the video description, but of course, keep coming back and keep fighting the good fight, and keep raising your voices and doing what you can to put pressure in order to make this all stop one way or another. All right, everybody, hit the like button before you go. First, Marandi is still here, I believe, but his camera just went circle, circle, circle. So that's our cue. Bye bye. Peace out. See you again soon.